Hey everybody, Robert with RC Archery here. For today's Tuesday tip of the week, I'm going to be going over everything you need to know about shooting two-finger releases. So shooting a two-finger release is something that I've done for a few years now. I actually started out using TrueBall HT Pro, the three-finger version, and just hanging my third finger off to shoot it as a two-finger. And I really played around with that, and then also the TrueBall HPC, and just seeing which one that I liked better in the platform and what worked better for the way that I was holding them. And then I actually just decided to pick the HT3, and I cut it, made it a two-finger, shaped it, shaped the finger beds a little bit, and I made it a custom how I wanted it to feel in my hand type of release. And I say that because I also want to lead that into the release that I'm shooting today. This is also a TrueBall release. This is the Fulcrum Flex. This is a Jesse Broadwater signature release that he worked together with TrueBall and they made. And this is the second tier. And the reason I shoot the second version of this is because it comes with interchangeable fingers on the end. And I've actually designed a two-finger attachment here that I've used called my R2 attachment that I sell on my website. This is one that I'm using right now, and the release, the reason I'm using it is because of some features on it. Just a little bit higher second finger bed here, so you see if you hold this release like it would be balanced on there, the second finger is a little bit higher. That allows you to get more leverage over that second finger bed, and it rotates the release naturally for you. Whether you're going to relax your hand, whether you're going to curl your fingers, whether you just pull through or use some kind of other method in between, this release is really versatile for that. Also, with the head being able to move left or right, get more over the index or more of the middle finger, you can really find that positioning and balance that you're looking for with this release. For me, it was a perfect fit. That's why I designed one of these release pieces here with another archer and started using them on my own. But with that being said, today I'm going to go over using any kind of two-finger release in general. I'm going to give you the benefits of why I'm choosing to use this and why I really lead and recommend a lot of archers to use a two-finger release. I'm also going to tell you how I set mine up speed-wise, what you might need to change on the bow, and then also the way that I shoot these releases just personally. So starting out with the benefits. For me, the benefits were pretty noticeable right off the bat when I started just hanging my third finger off a release. And then when I actually cut the release down that I was using at the time, and now that I'm using a just two-finger styled release, the benefits are even more pronounced. A lot of what you'll see with the release when you're using three or even a four-finger release is that you can get a lot of extra movement and a lot of extra torque on your hand, and you can actually pull the release up or push it down. When you do that, it's changing the way that it tilts the D-loop some, especially if you run a shorter D-loop. And that can cause you some problems with torque and also cause you some left and right arrow flight. And you can even get into some up and down issues as well. Switching to this two-finger release, I noticed immediately, obviously you have less fingers on the release, you have less torque that you're putting into that release. So it really helps you have a cleaner shot. One of the other benefits that I also see from using a two-finger release is just being able to flatten my hand out a little bit more and get a better elbow angle on my release, get a little bit flatter release arm, so that when I'm at full draw and I'm pulling through, it's a better plane of movement. And the reason I can do that is because you can see here, if I held this release like it would be with a three or four finger, my hand's up here on the release. But the way that I recommend to shoot a two finger and the way that I'm shooting one now is I drop those fingers off. And what that does is allows the hand to extend out a little bit more, gives you a little bit more length, but it also softens the outside of your hand. And when you soften these muscles here on the outside part of your hand, your inside portion of your hand will relax some too. And when you're using a hinge release, it's especially important because you can get that rotation and movement so much easier by doing this. A lot of people get a little bit timid and shy with these releases at first, and they keep a stiff hand. But if you'll learn to draw these back and relax the hand the way that I'm going to show you later in this video, it's really going to help you with overall shooting of these releases. Now, one thing you're going to notice when you switch over to a two-finger styled release is you're going to make a commitment to it, just like you would when you switch from an index to a handheld release, or if you switch from a button to a hinge style or a resistance release. The reason you're going to have to make that commitment is because you're going to have to change a little bit on release timing and possibly setup of the D-loop length on your bow. This is something that I see very common with myself and with other archers that I've worked with and set them up using two-finger style releases to begin with. The hinge speed itself has to get a little bit faster, and then your loop length on the bow a lot of the time has to get a little bit shorter. not a lot shorter. Sometimes it's just a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch. But the reason you need that shorter loop is because you're not having your hand here where it's tight and up on the release. You're actually letting it extend and come back. So you're letting that back arm come back a little bit more. You're letting that elbow rotate behind you more. And you'll notice that you lose a little bit of the leverage over the bow if you're keeping that same loop length, barring that it was correct before, of course. But you'll notice that you need to shorten that up again to get that perfect feeling and the way that your elbow needs to be lined up on target and everything. The other reason that I mentioned here on a hinge style release, and then I'll talk about a button as well, on a hinge style release you need to have it set a little bit faster than what you were using if you had it set up prior to using a 3 or a 4 finger style release, because you're going to draw it differently and because you don't have the extra leverage over the outside of that release to rotate it a little bit more as you're getting to anchor and full draw. Really, with the 2-finger release, I find it being a safer style to get an archer into, especially using a hinge release, so much so that I'll even use it with our 8-year-old son. First time he picked up a release, it was not a resistance, it was not a button. I actually handed him this release, this actual release. It's a little bit big for him, not something that he's going to stay with, but I went over it with the string trainer with him and got him accustomed to it and feeling right with it by looking at it, going through the string trainer process, and then actually even moving it over to his bow. Because if you draw the hinge the correct way, it's going to be safer as a 2-finger release, because you're really going to be focusing all your pressure on the thumb peg and your index, and that middle finger is just kind of there and it's along for the ride. So you actually pull it back with the index and the thumb, and you can pull it over to anchor. And then as you go to anchor, what I recommend doing is setting the speed up. I use a click. I prefer a click. I know there's benefits both ways, but I'm going to go over first with just using a click. The way that I will set it up is to draw it, get to anchor, take your thumb off that thumb peg and just kind of start relaxing the hand a little bit and letting the load transfer over to your middle finger. You want to have a little bit of the load on that middle finger to begin with, and I let that happen to get to my click. And then from there, I micro adjust the speed on these releases until I find the shot timing that I want and the way that I want the release to work for me, to where I'm not struggling and overusing the release, or it's happening too fast, my hand's popping away from my face, or getting kind of an awkward release that way. I'll show you on the bow and I'll talk through that. It'll make it a little bit easier for you. When it comes to a thumb button, you'll also notice that you probably need to lighten the button up just a little bit over what you were using if you're using the thumb button correctly. And the way that I would say is being correct is being able to apply just a little bit of preloaded pressure into that button to where you can feel it depress on your thumb. Applying that pressure to begin with is going to allow you, when you start to pull through your shot or start to manipulate the release, that pressure is already in the spot that you're needing it to, so it's naturally going to guide itself there to increase the pressure on the button. When you don't have the outside fingers on the 3rd or the 4th finger working to leverage that release, you need a little bit lighter button, because this middle finger here is not going to hinge and pivot that button into your thumb quite as hard. So you may notice you need to do that as well, so just kind of a heads up. When I go to draw the bow back, I'll show you here, and I'll just kind of talk you through a shot really fast, and then also take another shot and just let you see what I'm doing overall with it. I do a couple things differently with the 2-finger than some archers do, but for me, I feel like it's a little bit better, and I'm going to talk you through why that is. When I draw this bow back, I'm going to go ahead and I drop these fingers off that release, and again, focusing on the index and the thumb to get to my anchor point. And then once I'm anchored here, I let my thumb off that peg and just kind of relax my hand out and let it click. And then once it's clicking from here, I really don't focus on adding pressure to the fingers or curling or doing anything like that, because I don't have a full amount of pressure on that middle finger to begin with. So as I'm just kind of increasing the pressure in my body with a little bit of push towards target and a little bit of pull away, it's going to naturally start relaxing the hand and adding that pressure with the middle finger. That middle finger is going to take over for me and kind of pull through. That's what's going to help me with my shot. It's what's going to give me the release that I'm needing. And again, I just micro adjust the tune, or not the tune rather, but the speed of the release. And that's another reason why I like this Tru-Ball Fulcrum Flex, is because I did put a micro adjustment into it. I think that's a really big, benefit of hinge release, especially. On a button, I'm going to micro adjust the tension on that button for the same reasons, just to get the overall shot process that I'm wanting. The reason that I increase pressure in my shot is, for me, it steadies me up. it's not a huge push towards target or a huge pull, especially with a compound bow, because with a compound, your name of your game is really just the least amount of movement that you can induce into your shot to make you the steadiest is what's going to give you the best results downrange. Also with me, I'm not focusing on curling a finger or relaxing or doing any kind of thing to manipulate a release, so it does help me as far as not engaging with the target panic or a jumpiness or anything like that. And like I said, just increasing the pressure slightly during my shot, it really helps me steady myself on target. It gets me steadier, so when my shot is breaking, I'm actually in a window of a range where I'm at my steadiest. I linked a video earlier in this one up in the top, and I'll put it in again here too, but it's a really good one to watch as far as setting a release up for the correct release timing, and it's one that I think that a lot of people should watch, and it was an early on Tuesday tip of the week. I'm going to show you one shot here where you can see the entire process at a normal speed. All right, so when it comes to shooting a two-finger release, you can really do it the exact same as you would any other releases. And I've done videos in the past on multiple different ways to shoot either a thumb button release or a hinge style release. And I'll link both of those here in this video. That way you can go back, you can watch them. It might be something you can learn from specifically on a hinge or on a thumb button style release. But for today's video, I want to go specifically into just two-finger release styles that I've found to work the best for the majority of archers. So these are archers that I coach or work with or I've shot with. And of course myself and my findings over the last few years of using two-finger style releases. For me, I actually started out shooting a two-finger release the exact same way I shot all my other releases, and it was with the slow curl of the middle finger. And I actually found out by doing this that if I set the release up and my hand up the right way when I was getting to full draw, where my thumb was on the thumb peg, my index was here, when I'd get to anchor, I'd come off and let it click, and I'd leave this index, or middle finger rather, out a little bit. So I'd barely have it curled any at all around that release. And then that way, as I was shooting and as I was starting to curl the finger, I really didn't have to put a lot of movement in it, because just that natural curl of that finger, the tissue and everything on my finger was rotating the release and causing it to fire. I like that method a lot, and I still use it now, especially if I'm hanging up or something. It's my go-to method that I've used for a long time for a reason. But I will say that for a lot of archers, I've seen them get to a point where they get a little jumpy on that because they start trying to time their shot based off their float. They lose focus on their aiming. They really just start trying to manipulate that release, and they'll start grabbing and punching at it. So I do want to give you kind of a guidance on that to watch out for symptoms if you start seeing that. But for a two-finger release, it really works extremely well, because you're only dealing with these two fingers, and it's just seesawing that release around with the middle finger. Another method that I like to use with a lot of archers is when they get to full draw, instead of coming off the thumb peg and allowing the release to rotate through and get to a click, I tell them to come off the thumb peg and increase the finger on the middle finger until it presses and clicks. And when it clicks from that point, then you can just focus on relaxing the index and working through your shot and allowing it to fire. And the reason that you're increasing the tension with the middle finger to get to a click is because you're wanting to preload the pressure and shift it to the middle finger. What that does is it preloads the way the release is sitting in your hand and the way it's rotating. Then when you go to relax that index, you're already holding the pressure there on the middle finger, so it rotates the release through and it actually causes it to fire really smoothly and really easily for you too. So it's a very good method to use on a two-finger release especially. And for me, I noticed that when I was using this method on a 3 or a 4-finger style release, I would torque the release and it would pop away from my face really bad. On the two-finger, I don't notice it as much. So I really feel like this is a good method to use, and it's something easy to use for you that you can be consistent with. Some things, like I said, to look for on this is if you do start noticing that you're getting too relaxed on the hand and it's popping out away from your face, you need to look at the release speed. You need to look at either adding a little bit more pressure into the middle finger if you're being too timid with it, or you need to speed the release up so that you're not over rotating past its natural pivot and balance point, because you don't want to be here and then having to really relax the index finger and almost pushing the release forward in order to shoot, because then you'll get some crazy mishaps and things going on. You can combine these two methods. This is something that John Dudley has talked about in his Tooth Smooth videos. This is something that I've used and it does work very well, where you get to full draw. I do the same thing with this method as I would with relaxing my index finger method, but I don't quite add the same amount of pressure in the index or the middle finger rather before it clicks. I have it click a little bit sooner because I want a little bit more movement available into the middle finger as I'm relaxing the index finger, and it's just seesawing the release around, adding the pressure with the middle, releasing the pressure with the index. This method does work very well because for a lot of archers what they find is when you're at full draw and you're relaxing the index finger, the release is actually elongating. Your hand and your release is, that length there is lengthening. And what you'll notice sometimes is that you creep forward a little bit on the bow, especially if you have an aggressive cam, which is a lot of the reasons why I started curling the middle finger shooting spiral cams, because I was noticing that lengthening there. Using the seesawed method, you're actually taking up a lot of the space. You're relaxing out with your index by adding the pressure in with the middle finger, and you're actually pulling that release back a little bit more. So that does work very well, especially when you're getting a feel and getting used to shooting a two-finger release right at first. And then the preferred method that I'm using, this is my go-to as my primary and what I strive to teach other archers, but I really feel like it's more of an advanced technique with the two-finger because you've got to get used to the timing of the release. You have to get used to the way the releases feel in your hand and really be comfortable with your shot. And the release method that I'm using is basically an increase in pressure throughout my body while basically losing focus on the hand. When I take my attention away from my hand and I shift it to my aim on target, the tension and the pressure that I held in my hand, especially on my index finger drawing and anchoring, that starts to fade because you're not physically and consciously thinking about it. I'm focusing on my aiming, I'm focusing on driving my pin into the target and really just staring a hole down through the middle of the target where I'm trying to aim at. And by doing that, I'm forgetting about holding that tension on my index, and the tiny bit of movement that I'm using and the tension I'm increasing allows that release to rotate and it fires. This one takes a lot of time for you to really micro adjust the speed of the release, and it's also going to make you be really consistent on pressures of the hand when you're using the release. If you're inconsistent anywhere in those, you're going to have a harder time shooting your bow and being accurate and being consistent. But those are my methods that I found that work best with shooting a two-finger release, the way that I'm shooting these releases. And really just, I'm a huge advocate for these. I think if you shoot a two-finger release, you'll be more accurate. I really wish more people would try it. I know a lot of the pros, they're shooting three-finger releases because they've done that for so long. And I think there was a really good benefit for that maybe in the past when you had a little bit more movement, a little bit more, allowance in those bows with wheel cams or spongier back walls and kind of thing. With today's modern bows, with strong back walls, with being really easy to be able to torque a bow because your let off is higher, these two-finger releases are really beneficial to what you're using. If you want to see the R2 attachments that I have them in black, I have them in blue, green, red, orange. I can get them in purple, pink, yellow, I believe. Really anything you can believe as far as these set up. They're on my website. You can go to www.rcarchery.com. That's where I have my coaching, my videos that I sell, my Last Chance archery equipment, Hamskea, Rogue bowstrings that I am a distributor and a dealer for. All of this stuff is going to be on there. You can be able to check it out. These ship out pretty quick. Sometimes on some of the colors I have to special order them if I don't have them in stock, so they may take a little bit longer, but very affordable, work very well, very smooth the way that I've got them polished up, and really just fit the release really well. But yeah, appreciate everybody watching the video. I'm gonna have a two-finger release shootout coming up. I have all the knock-on Carter releases, the Nock To It, the Too Smooth, the Silverback. I also have, of course, my HT that I chopped down and molded. I have these Fulcrum Flexes. I'm gonna have that two-finger shootout, and I'm gonna go over more than just here's the pick that I have, because obviously I'm using this release here, but I want to go over why I'm using it and the benefits of all of those releases, and then some of the things that maybe aren't so good about all those releases, including this one as well, so that you can make a good educated choice based off of your personal preferences and what you would like. Thank you again for watching the video, and I'll see you soon.